It's time for Where You Live with Gene and Tony, the show that's all about owning, buying, selling, renting, and association management. If it involves a home, we'll talk about it. Here's your chance to get your homeowner questions answered. From the Concierge Landscape Studios, here's Gene and Tony.
Needed the shelter of someone's arms, and there you were.
Welcome back to Hour 2 of Where You Live with Gene and Tony. It's great to have you with us. I'm Gene Sullivan.
And I'm Tony Crockett.
And, our last guests, they were a fun couple to have on.
They certainly were. And they really agree with us and underlined our emphasis always to educate.
Yes.
Didn't they? They're doing that in Florida.
Doing that in Florida.
Susan and Bill are.
Susan and Bill Rappan, who started out, they said they were volunteers. Boy, to volunteer for that ombudsman office for people who living in condominiums, HOAs, were upset with not understanding how things go. And
they didn't understand what they'd gotten themselves into. And Susan and Bill said that's where they got the idea that it was about education.
Yeah, and that's where you get down to the basic premise that you're talking about. People have unrealistic expectations, not necessarily because of a self-interest, but because they don't know any better. They don't know what it is that they're dealing with. And so I think it's human nature. We always fill in the void if we don't have answers, right?
Well, yeah, that's true. We'll figure something out ourselves.
We'll figure something out, and they're
and what I figure out might be unreasonable.
Yeah, but I like the idea with that editorial piece about accountability and responsibility. I really agree with them. I think we're seeing in society today a big number of people that kind of feel like I guess I kind of call it the monopoly mindset. You know, they feel they have a get out of jail free card. You know, with anything in life. And you don't. You've got responsibilities because of decisions you've made.
That's right. And I want to say, I know there are people who've gotten in trouble with their mortgage, gotten in trouble with their home. They've lost their homes through poor decisions, through bad luck, whatever. And that has happened. That happens to people. Not everyone is going out there deliberately buying a home and not paying the mortgage payment and not paying the fees. Although I've run into that before. It's not always a deliberate act. Sometimes it's circumstances. But what I see happening so often is people in bad circumstances are looking anywhere and everywhere else for someone to bail them out or someone to carry the burden for them. And that's where I just lose all touch with. And that mindset with the situation
is continuing on even in our own government here in the United States. You know, you think about the last couple years, we have run the federal government without even an approved budget.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't, if we don't have state statute in Minnesota would not allow a homeowners association to act that way.
That's right. That's right.
But the
federal government is operating that way.
That's
right.
That way.
Yeah.
There's something wrong, and you get to a point you can't go to someone else to bail you out all the time.
And Susan Rappan said the first step she sees to turning this around is we got to foreclose on all these properties. And unfortunately, that's true in all aspects of our life. We have to take the bad consequences. We have to deal with the negatives in order to get through to a better situation.
I agree. Well, hey, folks, let's get into our next story here on Where You Live. By the way, we're broadcasting from the Concierge Landscape Studios. We're brought to you this hour by Extreme Exteriors and American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency. The next story we're going to turn our attention to is interesting. This came from Channel 4 News in San Antonio, Texas. That's WOIA. And it was entitled, Who Should Be Responsible for Court Fees and Why? And I thought this was interesting, Tony, because people have talked about this before. You know, there are, when you have a disagreement in a homeowners association, it's not uncommon for something to go to court. Or
in any area of life.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's not just HOAs.
Sure.
But when people disagree, you're talking about a civil matter, and you go to court.
Mm-hmm.
In a homeowners association, though, you have the governing documents that usually allow the HOA to be able to place those fees onto the homeowner living into the association when it comes to delinquencies, and for non-payment, when they have to deal with issues and having to just have compliance with the governing documents. We're dealing with a case in one of our associations we're managing now where it's a 55-plus building,
Mm-hmm.
only for people that are 55 years of age or older. That's written. It is in the governing documents.
Mm-hmm.
Someone purchased who has a young family and young kids
Mm-hmm.
and has moved in
Mm-hmm.
and is now taking the association to court.
Yeah.
And so you have this issue, and a lot of people have said for years, what would be a better way of dealing, a more responsible way in dealing with court fees? You have in our society and with American, the court system, everybody pays. Okay? You have, if I were to take you to court on
Mm-hmm.
a small claims matter,
Mm-hmm.
you pay for your costs. I pay for
So
mine.
you'd be paying the filing fee, probably. You'd be paying for your own attorney. I'd be paying for my own attorney
If that's what
to
you-
defend me. So you're saying that both sides in litigation in the United States pay their own costs.
That's right, exactly.
All right.
Now, then we have what's called the British system, which is
Different?
quite a bit different. Yes.
Yeah.
They have what would be called loser pay. And
I see.
and there's a growing group of people here in the United States that say we should go to that system.
And loser pay means what?
Loser pay means, hey, if I'm going to now take you to court, it means that if I take you to court and I don't win, not only do I have to pay for my court fees, I have to pay for your court fees.
And when you say court fees, you're including
attorney's costs,
right?
yes.
So in Britain, that's the norm.
Yes.
I see.
And people are saying
We should do that here.
we should do that because that would cut down on litigation. What do you think about that?
Well, now I don't have any hard knowledge of this, but I have heard that in Britain, lawsuits are like a hobby for some people. That they're probably the most litigious culture in the world right now, that they love to sue each other.
Really?
So that's what I've heard. Perhaps
Okay.
it's an urban legend, but that seems to illustrate that their loser pay philosophy is not really working.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because I've heard a lot of people in the United States who say we need to go to that system. We need to have some major tort reform when it comes to
Yeah.
the court system because that would allow people from coming up with frivolous lawsuits. But when it
I'm
comes,
not sure it would work. It's like every other piece of legislation. It's like, is it really going to have the consequences that we intend?
yeah,
Or in
you know,
practical, yeah.
it's in one sense, it sounds like it's something that would happen.
Yeah.
But you're right, and that is because we deal in a society where people are going to be unreasonable.
Well, and not only that, you can only imagine and construct so much on paper. It's when you get it out in the real world and
Yeah.
start using it that you find out really
Yeah.
what the consequences are. But now I've heard in the United States, often people will sue the other side for their legal fees and their attorney's fees, don't they? Isn't that part of the lawsuit?
Well,
often?
that does happen, but in those kind of cases, I believe you're talking about things where you have to prove harm was done. You have to prove
see.
Other things had taken place.
I not only have to win the case, I have to prove that I was harmed by this whole
Yeah,
situation.
yeah.
And I see.
Exactly,
All
but
right.
but if we're talking about basic disagreements
Uh-huh.
on a lot line between two
Yeah.
neighbors, there's no really harm, but you finally get something settled.
Yeah.
If it was in my favor in the British system, then you'd have to pay my fees.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen in the United
I
States.
see.
And the other part of it, though, the other side of the coin, though, don't you think, is that when you deal with what we have in the American system here, where both sides pay their own freight, basically, I think that causes for a number of cases to be settled outside of court. Because
everybody, I'm going to have to pay my attorney. You're going to have to pay your
yours.
Attorney. Right.
And if you know what that cost is, if you can come to an agreement and say, I can pay less.
If I stop this right now, if we negotiate, that's a very good point. That's a very good. I think
that's lost.
I think in Britain that may be why it's not working. Because if I sue you, I'm doing it with the intent that I am going to win.
Yeah.
And I am going to get my way, and you're going to have to pay the freight. You're going to have to pay the whole cost of that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that would deter frivolous lawsuits.
So this whole debate here on who's responsible for court fees and why.
Yeah.
Interesting as it pertains to an HOA. I used to be of the mindset that maybe going with a loser pay system would be the best way, but now
you're changing your mind.
I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
An interesting thing to think about. Hey, folks, we need to take a break right now. When we come back, we're going to be talking about this story that's been taking the nation's attention this last week with this young man who was killed in a neighborhood in a HOA. We're going to talk about this and the consequences for HOAs after these messages.